Hello and welcome back to another video in this series. This is the second video where we're going to be going into part one of the UX research. And the reason I'm doing this series, just to kind of remind you, is to kind of help you figure out where to start, understand, what deliverables you can use to put together a nice case study for your portfolio projects. So this is a concept project. We're going to have to make some assumptions, as we know, and ultimately the goal is to make it so that we are solving the product, whether that be a specific user flow or whatever exactly we see through the audit and the research that we find. Now, I want to address that it is completely normal to feel overwhelmed when trying to pick a concept project and figure out what your goals are. And that's why I'm creating this, is so that you can hopefully gain some confidence that this is possible. And even I, to some extent, have doubts going into this because I'm trying to make this as authentic as possible. I'm recording as soon as I finish one specific segment. So after I did the research, here I am recording instead of going on and doing additional design research and then implementing solutions. I'm not going that far. I'm just going to stop one step at a time. And I think that that's going to make for a more authentic experience for you guys, but also hopefully show you how I think through my process, because the part where you are trying to figure out the solution, I think, is the most interesting piece of all of the journey, or at least from the documentation side of things, like from watching from an outside perspective is what I'm really trying to say. So that's what we're going to be getting in the next few videos. And so I'm really excited for you guys to be sticking around. Something else I wanted to mention is that this is actually the second time that I'm recording this video. Initially, what I was going to do was finish one exercise and then record. Finish another, record, finish another. What I was finding, though, is that I wasn't able to really process everything that had just went down in that exercise, and then the influence of the research that I found in one exercise might affect another. So it was hard for me to sort of tie the research together. And that's why I decided, after basically recording and editing that entire video, I wasn't happy with where it came out. So what I'm doing today is I've already done all the research, and now we're going to be talking about half of it and kind of show you how it all ties together. And then in the next video next week, you'll be able to see how that also plays into what we found this week. Now, another thing that I want to mention is that I actually switched the order of the exercises. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about user reviews, which was the first one in the beginning. We're then going to be talking about the product overview, because I feel like this is super important for you to understand what the product is. That way you have a sense going into the competitor analysis video what you're looking for. Or at least I knew what I was looking for. As I mentioned, it's Jira. I've used the product and I use it every day, but I want you as the audience to be able to understand what Jira is as well. And then we're going to be talking about the primary user tasks, then the competitor analysis video, and then the user-centered design canvas. So we'll be going over all of those today. And then next week, we're going to be finishing it out, and I'll tell you all the exercises that we went through. Today's, I would say, exercises are kind of simulating like a stakeholder interview. So I wouldn't say this is like strictly UX, but this is also getting a sense of like business goals as well. And so I think that that's super critical. If you're trying to improve a product, you need to know where the business stands and what you're trying to, solve for. There are going to be some assumptions that we're making. And some of the goals that we have today are to understand the usability pain points based on the user reviews. Then we're going to get to know the product and what it does. We're going to get familiar and list out the primary user tasks, which we will look to improve. Then we're going to choose the user tasks we're going to focus on improving, at least initially going into the UX UI audit. We're going to be focused on seeing where their usability issues are even further, because that audit is where we're going to really find all of those pain points. Then we're going to discover additional user pain points through the competitor video and see how business goals, user goals, and product aligns or it doesn't align, and see where the friction is caused. At a high level, we're also going to be using design thinking, and design thinking is more of a philosophy rather than like a framework. So there's not specific exercise tied to each step of design thinking, but we're going to be using that philosophy, that mental model, to sort of go through all these exercises in this entire case study. So I'm actually pulling up design thinking on the screen here. That way you can get a sense of what the steps are in the process. If you haven't heard of it before, it's basically a methodology or a philosophy that helps you to basically come up with ideas for improving a product. It's very much an innovative concept. So you start off by empathizing and understanding who your users are, and then so that's where we are today. That's what we're focusing on. The goal by the end of the research is to get to this define stage. So when you combine all your research and observe where your users' problems exist, honestly, we won't be done with that until the UX UI audit, but we'll start to have some sort of defining attributes as far as what we want to solve in this case study. And then we're going to ideate, which is where the design research for and then coming up with solutions, that piece is going to come in. And then prototyping, we're going to put together a prototype and do some really really small user testing in this case study, simply because it is a concept project that I'm not trying to like drag on. I don't want it to drag on forever. So I'm going to make this a very quick and simple concept project, if that makes any sense. And then usually then you would hand it off and implement the solution. So that is design thinking. Now, one other thing I want to mention before we get into it is, because I don't have a deep understanding of this product, it's going to be hard for me to affect some of the more complex user flows. So I'm going to be sticking to ones that I'm most familiar with, simply because I don't have the ability to talk to a client, or in this case, Jira, and understand some of the more technical user flows. So just kind of something to keep in mind. All right, so let's talk about the first exercise, which was the user reviews. What I did is I went on Capterra and G2 Crowd, went through all of the user reviews that were within the last 2 years. That way it's somewhat relevant. Even I think about a year ago, they made some updates to the UI. So I wanted to pull whatever I could find in the last 2 years so that it could give me as much ammunition as possible. I took some notes to sort of simplify the way that I'm looking at this information. First thing I wanted to see were the user titles. So there was some executives in there. There was admins, which I would consider like product managers, team lead managers, product directors, software engineering managers. Those are the first main user persona that we're going to be fixated on. So we're going to be fixated on product managers and engineering managers, and then contributors. So contributors, in this case, we're going to be focusing on software engineers. And it's not so much that they had the most reviews. Actually, some of the challenge was that they didn't always have the title, especially in G2 Crowd reviews. I didn't know their title, but it was pretty obvious just kind of reading through the review that it was somebody that would be a power user of the application. And that's why I'm going to be focusing on software engineers, because those are the people that are mainly using this application, which I'll get to in a second when we get to the product overview, so you can get a sense of like what Jira is on a much deeper level. But I kind of touched on it in the intro, or in the intro video. And then the last was miscellaneous, so things like senior consultants and marketing. I have here. I didn't delete all of these, so there's some duplicative, but you kind of get the gist. Then what I did is I took out quotations out of all platforms. Like Jira is the slowest. This is like an IT title. So I took out basically just different quotes that I felt like were most relevant to the project. I'm not actually going to read through all of these, simply because we're going to be talking about how these play into the user personas in next week's video. But at a high level, what I was able to find from the user reviews was some pain points that were clear and obvious, and primarily what I was able to get out of it was the personas that we want to focus on, just based on the feedback that they were given. So pain points, frustrations, it really helped me to get to know the user just a little bit more. So that was the goal. And you're not always going to be able to use this one if you don't have reviews, but in this case, it worked out really nicely. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys about the next piece here, which is the product overview. And I went through some of the videos, as I kind of mentioned. I actually did a few more than these. I should also mention these. It took me longer than 20 minutes to actually do user reviews. It probably took me more like 45 to 50 minutes to basically take all those notes and read through them all. In this case, it probably took me about an hour and a half to do the user reviews. In this case, it actually took me about an hour and a half to do the product overview. But I wanted to share a couple of images that I felt like were super relevant that you guys could get to know the product a little bit better. So one of the videos I watched is by this company called IntelliPat, and they talked about the agile process and did a really nice job of laying out the framework for how it works. So you have basically one piece of functionality that you're trying to focus on, and that's usually within a given sprint. So you'll plan, implement, test, review. You'll finish that sprint, and then you'll go on to the next functionality. Sometimes in a sprint, you're working on one piece of functionality as well as improving the existing functionality. And that's usually when you have a larger team, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 engineers, that you could actually do those kind of things. We couldn't do that initially when I was start in the company that I'm at, the product that I was working on. We didn't have as much I guess bandwidth to be able to do that, but now we have 4 engineers that are working on the specific product that I work on. I have another 4 engineers on my other team, and so we can work through things pretty quickly. So yeah, this is sort of what a sprint looks like. It's usually a 2-week process. So that's the first one I wanted to show. The second one I want to show is basically showing how Jira works. And this is just a really simplified way of seeing it. So what are we trying to achieve is what's considered the epic. It's like the big picture, ultimate like goal that we're going for. And then underneath the epic is a feature which will help us achieve that epic. So in this case, we can say an epic would hold 1 or 2 features typically, and then within those features there are stories, and then within those stories there are tasks. So that is how Jira works. When you look into the interface, you'll see that that's how we build out tasks. And this admin ease of use is really challenging for a lot of people, because it's not that it's a hard tool to use. In some cases it is. For me personally, I haven't found it to be hard. Once again, the people that are using this product are targeted for this solution. I will say that Jira has different templates. So they have templates for even like accountants to marketing to salespeople. Those people may have more of a challenge actually adopting Jira. And I don't actually know how many people would use those templates. But in our scenario, I don't think that the challenge is that it's too difficult to use from the specific like entering in epics, features, stories, and tasks. I think it's just the amount of time that it takes to do it, and then to do things like grooming, which is like story point, giving a story a point system, which basically lets you know as the product manager, engineering manager, how much time it's going to take for an engineer to complete that specific user task. That's where it gets really tedious because there's a lot of clicking involved. So what we're trying to do, just based on everything that I've learned and seen through all the research, is figure out how to simplify the time it takes to enter in tickets, to groom, and basically do the process that you need to do in order to be efficient in your agile methodology. Now, the next one I want to show is the agile scrum roles. So they listed out 3: product owner, which in our case is a product manager, a scrum master. A lot of the times that can still be the product manager, but it also could be the engineering manager. You could kind of see it as that, and then the scrum team. So that's how we're going to be seeing this: is the scrum team is the software developers, scrum master is our engineering manager, and product manager is at the top. So product managers can also create stories. I will say though, it doesn't have to be specifically that product managers only create epics and scrum masters only create stories, and then Scrum teams do create tasks, but all three of them create tasks. That's kind of how that works. So this is the second to last one. And then the last one that I want to show you, I think this is really helpful for you to kind of get a sense of like what are the sprint activities. So on a daily basis, we meet for what's called a stand-up. That is like a 15-minute meeting where we talk about what we worked on the day before and then what we're about to work on. And then there's a section at the end where if anybody has something to bring up, it's called parking lot. And then we talk through it. Maybe they need clarification around a ticket, or maybe I need to show off a design just to get a sense of how the team thinks about it. Maybe I want to get some iterations done prior to me, quote unquote, completing the ticket. Just getting maybe copy from the team, different things like that that you can just bring up before the ticket's ready to be marked as complete or put into review. This pretty much summarizes it outside of these ceremonies. So ceremonies, one of those being the daily stand-up, second, the grooming, which is where we go through a meeting and talk about all the stories that I've worked on as a designer. Now the engineers are going to point it, which is what I was kind of talking about. So points can come in, it's like a Fibonacci scale is what we use. Half point, 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, 5 point, 8 point is generally what that looks like. A half point might take an hour or two. A 1 pointer might take a half a day. A 2 pointer might take a full day. A 3 pointer might take 2 or 3 days. A 3 pointer might take close to 3 or 4 days. I don't know. It sort of depends. The team comes to a agreement as far as like what a point looks like. And then what I do as a designer is I do t-shirt sizing, which is kind of a similar idea where it's extra small, small, medium, large, and extra large. And that's basically letting my product manager know how long it's going to take for me to get done the ticket that I'm working on. So kind of a similar idea. So I just wanted to kind of lay out what Jira does, who it's for, what the product sort of does without actually showing you the product, because we're going to get into that pretty heavily in the UX UI audit. So that's this task. Now, through doing the product overview, I was also able to figure out the user task, which is super important. So these are the primary user tasks that we're going to be focusing on that you're seeing here on the screen. There's 11 of them. The first would be creating your first project, so creating your Kanban board. And then from there, you can edit the issue layout. So these are the fields that you're going to be using when you create an epic, a story, a bug, a task, and a subtask. So you'll probably want to fix those first before you start creating those things. And then the second is you can create custom fields. So you can remove the ones that are basically out of the box. And I will say, we're going to be talking about this in the user personas. Out of the box, Jira, you can see how many sub-tasks that you have to create just to log an epic or a story or whatever. There's a lot of tasks. There's a lot of secondary and third and fourth and fifth and seventh questions just to fill this out. And that's where it gets frustrating for a lot of people, because it may only take you, maybe it's a 1 pointer and it takes you a few hours. It takes sometimes 10, 15 minutes just to fill one of these out if you really want to be logging it accurately with detailed information and all those things. There needs to be a way to make this simpler for those that just don't want to have to see it as a chore, right? Like, we want to make this product exciting to use. So that's a big reason why we're focusing on those user tasks. So creating those custom fields, then creating those issues, creating a sprint after the issues have been created. You can also create subtasks within the stories. That's not always necessary, but I wanted to add that. And then importing issues. I'll talk about this in the next competitor analysis video, but the competitor analysis video that I chose was ClickUp, and they talk a big part of why Jira causes you to lose 1 day every week is because of the simplification of basically data entry in Jira, in ClickUp. So with that said, how are we going to make importing a simpler process? Because right now there are 4 steps to importing, and it's way more complicated than it really needs to be. So I think that's a huge one that we can fixate on. Then the last one is editing the Kanban board workflow. So still, I put a note here, still researching, but those are basically the swim lanes as you take a ticket to the next step. You have to edit those, and that is that workflow process is something I sort of mentioned in the intro video of this series, that it's way more complicated than it needs to be. So those two are the more complicated ones, and then the other ones are just tedious. So that's the user flows that we're going to be focusing on in this going into the UX UI audit. All right, so kind of going into the competitor analysis, first thing I want to mention is that Jira's marketplace is often used to improve the functionality and overall experience of using the product, but you shouldn't have to download plugins to make the product work the way you anticipate or the way you hope that it would work. It's similar with WordPress, and why I think a tool like Webflow is continuing to dominate. It's because Webflow out of the box, you can, for example, configure the SEO the way that you want to without having to download a plugin like Yoast or continually update those plugins. Things like integrating like a MailChimp form, you have to download a plugin for that in WordPress, whereas it's fairly easy to just do so with, I think you can just embed the form. Just different things like that, where it's just, why are you forcing me to have plugins or know about these plugins in the first place to make the tool work the way I want to? That's where ClickUp was pretty focused in this competitor analysis video. They talked about how there was 3 different use cases that they talked about. The Scrum and the full Agile were the only 2 that were pretty relevant to what we're talking about. And these are the 2 Scrum demo and full Agile feature sets that ClickUp offers. You'll notice anything with an X, that was something that Jira didn't have. Anything that says up to are features. In this case, all of these features, you'd have to pay up to $240,000 to get those features when it's just free in ClickUp. And then you'll see here in the full Agile, it's another 586. All in all, for those 3 use cases, it was almost $1 million for features that you shouldn't have to, necessarily add as plugins. And we don't need all of these specifically for this case study, but the point of this was to just show you that out of the box, the onboarding with ClickUp is so much simpler. And that is where I think we need to be focused on. And that's what this competitor analysis really opened my eyes to, because the use cases that we're focused on are pretty heavily related to onboarding and admin. So just like data entry. And a lot of the pain points that I was seeing in the user reviews was that small teams really, it's like cumbersome to set up Jira for small teams. And the problem with that is that Jira offers a free subscription for 10 users. So out of the box, you should be able to compete with ClickUp, but it's just not that easy. So it's tedious, it's cumbersome, and if you just look at ClickUp or Asana, it's night and day difference between the 2. So that's like the big takeaway that I got from doing this competitor analysis. There were some features that I didn't think were all that necessary for ClickUp and that they focused on in the webinar that I just didn't see like a huge need for this specific case study. But I have a lot of ideas that came from there. I don't want to just simply copy what they're doing, but now I know where there is an opportunity to kind of close the gap between the 2 products. And it's also similar to the others like Asana as well, where they're just much simpler to get started. So one thing I wanted to mention is bulk editing was something that ClickUp did really, really well. And I think bulk editing, I mentioned, was a really complex user flow in Jira. So if we can close the gap there, that would be a huge win for this case study. All right, so now I want to talk about the last task that I worked on in this first part. So the user-centered design canvas. It's similar to like the, um, I think it's called like the business model canvas. I forget what it's called, but you've probably seen something that looks fairly similar. This is slightly different. It was created by the rectangles, and I mentioned it in the intro. What we're trying to do here is learn more about the business, more about the users, and more about the products to figure out where there is friction, figure out where there are strengths, and then I can kind of assess going forward where we need to be thinking, where we need to focus. So let's kind of talk through this. The first piece here is the business, which is a bug tracking and agile dev tool for mid-size and large product engineering teams. Now, with onboarding in mind, there are going to be small teams that can use this tool that may get funding and that may grow and then need to use a tool like Jira. A lot of those tools like ClickUp and Asana and Trello, people end up leaving those tools for Jira. They hate the fact that they have to leave a tool that's easier to use to go to a tool that's more complicated simply because it's more powerful. Um, it's more powerful specifically for software engineering teams. So that's who I'm specifically talking about in this instance. But imagine if they didn't have to leave, and because they get 10 free user licenses with Jira to get started, you would think small teams should be able to work their way with Jira and grow with the software. And that's where I want to focus this whole case study on, is for small teams that are growing or for mid-sized teams that are just trying to be more efficient. Same with large teams, just more efficiency for those larger teams. So the second piece here is the users. The 3 user personas that we're going to be focusing on are product managers, which are in an admin role, engineering managers, which are also in an admin role, and then engineers, which are contributors to the project. We talked about that, and we're going to continue to talk about that in the user personas. The third one here are the problems. So I wrote these problems before doing some of the other exercises. Let's see if they still stand true. Teams need a way to track bugs and feature work. Definitely true. And more importantly, they need to be able to do that in an efficient way. Teams need a way to organize their sprint work and backlog, 100%. And then there isn't an easy way for teams to get on the same page for their grooming and planning meetings without Jira. I truly believe that if we didn't have Jira, there's no way we would be able to do those ceremonies effectively. So very true. Fourth one here is the motive. So organization and visibility is the key for hitting business goals and keeping stakeholders in the loop. Second is sprint velocity and bug tracking is crucial to ensure that the team is improving over time. So Jira has some reporting that shows basically how efficiently the team is working on that given sprint, and then you can compare sprints over sprints to see how many points that they've achieved in that sprint. And then there's a burn down chart, which is basically the time it takes to complete the ticket. So things like that are very relevant to making the team more and more efficient and kind of seeing where improvements are being made. Fifth, we're talking about fears here. So fear of the product manager is unsure where the team is at during the sprint, not able to keep stakeholders in the loop in the dev process. Tickets and issues slip through the cracks, which leads to churn users. And this is actually something that happens in Jira, because if you don't fill out certain fields, you can lose your ticket. That's a huge issue. So it is an admin related piece, and we're going to try to think about how to simplify all the subtasks that come with those primary user tasks without causing those sort of like slips through the crack moments. And then we aren't organized and able to come out with the right feature work. That's very possible that could be outside of that could be blamed on many things, but Jira can still help with that. And then unsure of how long it will take to complete the work. So that's where Jira comes into play with story pointing. And I think there's an easier way to do that than Jira does today. Six, So solutions, bug tracking, ticket creation, new feature ticket creation, very straightforward. Sprints allow for focused efforts of work and help to create small achievable goals. That's the whole premise of breaking down the feature into multiple different user tasks and making sure that you can achieve that feature with those user tasks. Then backlog helps the team to prep on what they will work on next and later. So the backlog also can tie into the product roadmap overall. So you create an epic that you place on your roadmap, which you can do in Jira. That way you can keep your stakeholders in the loop as far as like what you're going to be working on in this quarter. And then even 6 months down the road, you can have epics sort of created. You can have all of your tasks associated to those epics, all the features associated to those epics. Sometimes you can argue that in our case, we use epics as a feature, and then we put basically all the stories that would create that feature in the backlog or in the roadmap. That way people know what we're going to be working on as a team. And so that's really helpful. 7, alternatives are ones that we've talked about. ClickUp, Asana, Trello, Monday.com, Basecamp is another one I haven't mentioned, and then Clubhouse. So all project management tools that are very much simpler tools to use. So that's where we're going to try to close the gap. And then competitive advantage, we have a reputation in the market with Jira, and it is a more tailored solution to engineering teams. So those are who we're focused on, and we're going to continue to dominate with this case study. I guarantee it. The unique value proposition, had to come up with one on my own, and all of this I did. I didn't want to get influenced, so I put down that Jira is the best tool for product and engineering teams that are looking to track and plan out their work in an organized way that scales for enterprise teams. That's just my personal opinion, and I think a lot of people would agree. So covered a lot in this video, and I really hope that you could kind of get a sense of where the product's going or where this project is going forward. What I will say is this is more of like the key stakeholder research. In next week's video, we're going to be doing a lot more of the like true UX user research. And so stick around for that. You will not want to miss that. There's going to be such valuable information for you guys to see in that video. Today's design rec, let's talk about it. Memorisely is a boot camp out there based in the UK. They were started around like October 2020, so a little bit after when I was going through my boot camp research, so that's why I haven't mentioned them before. They have they call it the UX UI tribe, and they have a Slack group that I've been a part of. It says join 3,200 designers. They have more like almost 6,000 designers at this point, so it hasn't been updated. Lots of countries. I'm assuming if you're watching this video, you're probably somebody that would like to be in this Slack group because there are just so many great parts of the community. I actually should just pull it up for you guys. All right, so let's take a look at the Memorisely tribe. So there's an introductions piece, which over here, obviously, you're going to meet people and just sort of network. So you can see like 5,500. There's a book club, which is really cool. That's starting, I guess it starts every month. This month, we're going to be doing a book called Show Your Work, which I have. So they kind of lay out how the whole book club works, September through October. Okay, so it's 2 months. And then, yeah, you can read a book along with other people and talk about it here in the Slack group. They have Club Figma, Notion, Webflow. So all these tools, if you have questions about, you can come in here and ask your questions, get feedback. UX UI chat. Sometimes people come in here and ask people to take user research surveys for a concept project that they're working on. So you can come in here and get people to take your survey if they fit your user persona. Things like job postings, you can find them here. So I've created my own Slack group. I think that they are a more robust version of what I want to end up becoming, but I think this is a great resource for you to have. They have all sorts of good stuff here. So highly recommend signing up. It's free. Why not do it? And with that said, I'm going to conclude this video. Remember that it takes 10,000 hours to master a skill. So what are you guys designing today? Make sure to leave me any comments. I'd love to kind of hear your feedback overall on how this series is going for you guys. And let me know if there's anything that you want to see going forward, because we're going to be doing another project and I will make sure to take in any sort of feedback that you guys have. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.